What's going on, guys? Aarava here, and welcome back to my series called Let's Talk F1, specifically, obviously, this time around for F1 2017. The brand new cars are launching all throughout the week, and obviously this one is an exciting year in terms of the actual cars being launched, because the cars are all going to look very, very different. Obviously, a whole set of new different aero regulations. If you're not familiar with the regulations, I made a video quite some time ago talking about the changes for 2017. I'll put a card annotation on screen, so you can go click that in the top right. But let's get into this. The brand new Sauber launched today online, and there it is. Let me know what you think about the livery. I personally quite like it compared to last year's livery. You know, the kind of nice kind of trim touches of gold work quite well with the blue, white contrasting on the side pods. I like it. Some people don't. Let me know what you think in the comments below. But anyway, in terms of the actual aerodynamic analysis of the car, obviously straight away you can see the difference for the 2017 rules. That's very, very simple and arbitrary. Obviously the front wing has got that new tapered style, which is there for pure aesthetics. You can see the rear wing also is kind of bent and warped and lowered and widened, and you'll see on the kind of the side panning shot it's also slanted back. But in terms of when we're talking about the aerodynamics of the car, one of the biggest challenges faced by all the teams this year will be trying to get airflow successfully around and kind of to the edges of the tyre sidewall on the front of the car. Obviously the tyres are widening, the front wing has widened with it, but not as much as the tyres have widened, so there's a little bit more work for the team to do. And also because the fact they've got that area behind the tyre of the barge board being enlarged, basically the box that the teams can work with has kind of been extended and made larger, so they can use a lot more devices there to kind of get the flow around to the side pod. So you're going to see probably, especially the top teams, probably trying a lot of clever things around the barge boards right behind the front tyres to basically get flow to where they want it to go. And also you can see the Sauber car, and probably a lot of teams, it looks like the pattern is they're not going to actually use the full width they're allowed on the side pod. You can see there's quite actually a hefty gap between that side pod and the actual upright vane that's extending off the floor, and they've got two struts going off to kind of structurally support it. So I think a lot of teams are going to do that. We saw that with the Williams car, the online soft launch that they did on Sunday. You could see that they didn't use that space either. You know, a lot of teams looks like they're going to keep that area kind of a bit more open to allow flow to go through, and maybe obviously, you know, try and affect it with some turning vanes. Sauber got this interesting tiny little vane on the edge there, so I think what they're going to try to do, this one is a bit more of a speculation on my part, but I think what they're going to try and do with that tiny little vane on that upright is trying to send flow to over the rear tyre to where that rear wing is going, because you can see the rear wing kind of bends over the rear tyre a little bit awkwardly, and I think they may be trying just to channel the flow that way. You can see on the floor towards the front of the rear tyre, the usual sort of stuff. We saw this a lot you know, with pretty much every single team last year, a lot of little squirt slot gaps in the floor. You can see two little veins. I've only actually outlined one, but you can see there's actually two there if you look close enough in the shadows. Quite an awkward kind of lighting by Sauber to kind of hide some stuff maybe, but the kind of turning vanes and the slot gaps and the floor, trying to make the diffuser work harder, and also because they've got that tyre width now. They've got the rear tyre is absolutely massive now in F1, you know, so they need to try and work a lot harder to get flow around it, just because there's so much more actual rubber to get around. But if we move on to the front shot, you can see Sauber have opted for the thumb nose again, and there are a few people I've saw on Twitter that were surprised or kind of really upset that the thumb nose was still there, as if like they thought the rules were going to get rid of the thumb nose. Wasn't the case ever with these new 2017 rules. The FI have basically a box, a 3D box of where the nose needs to be, but behind that, the nose doesn't need to, you know, there's no rules that the nose needs to converge in a nice kind of triangular shape to the point of the tip. So all the teams, you know, maybe Mercedes, they'll go with the same style they've always gone with. You know, it's pure personal preference of what the teams want to go for. Obviously, if they design the car in the way that they design it with a thumb nose in mind, they're going to stick with it the entire time through development. So Sauber have done that, Williams have done that. Williams have pretty much gone with the exact same nose they've gone with since basically the end of 2014, 2015. Basically, but Sauber have opted for that same sort of solution, I should say. But you can see now the huge amount of space that is there between the actual end of that nose cone and the tire. There's a lot of working area. You can see the barge board clearly is so much larger now, and I think a lot of bigger teams are going to really be quite clever with that. You know, the likes of Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull. You might see serrated barge boards, a lot of clever kind of, you know, triple element barge boards almost, to maybe really affect the flow quite a lot. But I highlighted at the top of the side pod, you got the Sauber kind of upright extending over. Looks very simple. I'm hoping for their sake that that's just because it's a car launch. A lot of this stuff, a lot of the time in these analysis videos, you'll see that during testing, a lot of the stuff I pick out in terms of being simple or, you know, a little bit odd may completely just get wiped out in testing, because when the cars launch online like this, or, you know, in person, sometimes the teams obviously want to hide some stuff from their competitors, so they may not have as complex of a car as they actually have during testing. But usually you see top teams, I've kind of just drawn little lines there, usually you see top teams have Vortex Generators at the top of the side pod, because that effectively allows the air to, you know, encourages the air to mix at the top of the side pod. That encourages it to stay attached to the top of the side pod, and obviously the side pod then converges down towards the diffuser, and that's all an aid to try and make that diffuser work a lot better. And obviously this year in 2017, the diffuser is a lot larger as well, so it's a big point trying to get that already bigger diffuser to work even more efficiently and better. Also, Sauber have opted for the split air box at the top. Last year they went for a more triangular, just single air box, so a lot of teams seem to be going with this strategy. You had Mercedes go for that, you had Toro Rosso has a triple one, I believe, I think it was, and also Renault had that very odd looking one last year. So Sauber have again now kind of gone with the trend. Looks like that looks to be the trend at the moment in F1, the split air box, to try and get two different cooling parts to the engine. Obviously, remember, Sauber now have the old Ferrari engine, so away from the aero side, that's going to be a big talking point. That, honestly, you know, Sauber have said on their website they're going for aerodynamic stability. I really don't know how much that's going to help with the fact that we saw last year with the Toro Rosso with an old engine, that clearly towards, you know, races like USA, that even though Carlos Sainz pulled out a worldly performance there, you could see that against the Honda engine and the McLaren, that old Ferrari engine in the back of the Toro Rosso, Renault engine was struggling. And so this old Ferrari engine in the Sauber really might come back to bite them, man. It's very odd to me that they made that deal. Obviously, maybe they had to, you know, they couldn't afford the new Ferrari engine, so obviously probably is cheaper for them to go with that old Ferrari engine, but I think that they're really going to struggle towards the end of the season with that. So for their sake, I really hope they do have some good updates coming through. Obviously, they've got new backers, so the hope is they can get that R&D underway. But also highlighted that job that all the teams have to do, not just Sauber, every team has to do this year in F1, trying to get flow around that tire, that huge hefty tire. It's actually part of my dissertation in my degree. If you don't know, I'm an aerospace engineering student. That's actually part of my dissertation, looking at the flow getting around the tire and the front end, and it's a big task. It's a big task to try and do that. It was already difficult enough, but now you've got that just extra bit of rubber to get around. But essentially what every team will be trying to do is get flow around to the kind of top corner of that sidewall, because what you're going to see if we move on to the side panning shot here is that off the tyre, there's this wake of rotating vortexes, and the teams need to try and smoothen that out, try and introduce a bit more smoother air to kind of encourage mixing of that vortex to basically get it back to a bit smoother than it was coming off the car. And then especially at the bottom of the tyre, you just have these rotating vortexes and just turbulent air that is not as useful, obviously, as free stream smooth air going through the car. So they need to try and smoothen that as best they can. Obviously, also, if we go back to the front, because I mentioned there's that big area of barge board now, they might also use a lot of that. They might focus a lot more on that, perhaps. That part I'm not too sure. They might focus on that more than the outer part. We've seen a lot for the last 3 years now, even before that. A lot of focus has been getting the air around the tyre to the outside sidewall. Now you may see, because of the large area and maybe a lot more prime real estate for the barge board, teams may focus on that more. I can't tell personally, but you might see that. And also, just picking up again on the really tiny sidepod compared to the actual space they're allowed, that huge area where you got the two struts coming across, it looks like a lot of teams might be going for that. Instead of actually using the side pod and taking it right to the edge where they're allowed to, they're going to keep it nice and tight and just focus on getting the airflow around around that kind of tighter shape. Obviously, it seems like a lot of teams now are getting the hang of packaging their engine a lot better, because even Sauber now looks a lot tighter on the rear end, and now the kind of days of just calling the McLaren size 0 maybe kind of past it, because now every car is looking to get a lot tighter at the rear. And if we quickly look at this kind of more overhead shot of the front end, you can see also there's been a bit of development for Sauber at the brake actual point, the actual brake cover and the actual brake duct. A very small brake duct, it looks like, compared to last year's Sauber, so that's a little bit surprising. We've seen teams like McLaren have quite a big one in comparison, but they've got 3 different small little elements coming off that actual brake kind of cover section. Yeah, I don't know exactly what to call it, but 3 different actual veins to try and affect flow in that brake area. So again, that inside area I think is going to become a lot more focused this year because of that. And again, just trying to point out what teams generally try and do with the front wing. They've got that middle part on the inside of towards the actual middle of the main plane. That's all going towards the barge board underneath the car. But then on the outside, they're trying to clean up that area where you've got that vortex wake and separated flow coming off the front tire. They're trying to clean that up and encourage it to kind of get back a bit more smoother as it goes towards that side pod. But that's the kind of overhead shot, and you can clearly see that lovely, in quotes, thumb nose that a lot of people may not be happy to see. But that's just on part of the FIA not changing the rule for the kind of box at the front of the nose. And from a different angle of the same sort of area of the barge board, you can see this interesting 2-piece veins coming off the floor. Smaller one nearer to the actual extending upright, and then a larger upside-down L-shaped vein curving off. So really a big area, as I mentioned, to try and affect that flow around and then towards the rear of the car, either towards the diffuser or trying to maybe clean up flow just coming on the side of the entire car itself. And then you've got that undulating floor of the kind of 2 different kind of peaks, I should say, not troughs, 2 peaks that we've seen quite a few times from other teams, where they like to kind of bend the floor upwards and kind of curl it around just to try and attract flow to use that shape, because it will stick to that shape because the flow's going so fast that it will try and attach to that shape as if it was like a liquid going down a pipe. But again, just a bit more detail on that area, and I think bigger teams are going to be so much more detailed perhaps, and it's going to be a very big area, I think, of development race. On the side shot I picked out again on the rear wing, you can now see that slanted back effect, and it's been shallowed, and you can see the little kind of dent in the paintwork that it looks like. That's where the wing effectively bends over the rear tire. But obviously a big thing you can see on the engine cover is the shark fin on the Sauber in a kind of different carbon fiber, which I personally think might look better a little bit, maybe in blue or white or even gold perhaps. I'm not too sure, but they're gone for carbon fiber, maybe just for simplicity. But we haven't seen this sort of shark fin since 2011, I believe it was. We saw in 2010 it was a shark fin merging into the rear wing, because a lot of them were using the F-duct solution to try and stall the rear wing, and that's how they used to get the airflow kind of piped through. And then in 2011 they kind of used the shark fin momentarily, but then most of them kind of got rid of it because eventually it just wasn't needed. But the reason why teams would put a shark fin again for this year especially is because the shark fin allows you to get less turbulent air actually affecting the rear wing, because during the car, especially in the cornering, when the car's turning around, you've got that shark fin coming across, and any air that goes through and hits that shark fin, basically all the vortex turbulence is going to come off the tip essentially. So it basically concentrates the flow. It's a lot like an end plate works. An end plate works like that. That's why motorsport cars have end plates on their front wings and the rear wings, because it basically tightens up the vortex coming off to the tip point, rather than if you didn't have the end plate, the vortex would affect the entire main plane wing usually a lot more, but the end plates focus that vortex and get it away from the main plane. In this instance, there's no main plane obviously on the shark fin cover, but the tip vortex being focused a lot more upwards over the rear wing will mean there's less chance of the rear wing being affected by that turbulence. So you may see quite a lot of teams actually using the shark fin method, and I believe if I remember correctly, the Williams also had a shark fin on their soft launch. I'm not going to do an analysis on the Williams quite yet, because that was a very weird kind of online soft launch, and it was very clear that the Williams was very oversimplified. So I'm going to wait for Williams to do an on-track kind of debut to maybe see if I want to analyze that car. But I feel like Sauber's quite a big one to do, because, Sauber's at the back, and they're struggling, and it's always hopeful to see if they're trying to, make development work. And also the car was very striking as well, so I thought you guys might be interested in that. And also you can see the split airbox is actually slanted back, actually, interesting enough, so it looks quite interesting. But then again, I've just kind of circled that large area. You can just see, if you look and compare this picture back to 2016, 2016, you can just see how much more real estate the teams are allowed in that bargeboard area. But again, you can see the little fin on the end plate, and you can see it's kind of angled up towards, if you drew a straight line across towards that rear wing. So that's just my personal opinion. I think that's what they're trying to do there. May be wrong. Obviously, I'm only an engineering student, so I'm not a complete expert, so take everything I say with a little pinch of salt, but I think I have enough knowledge to accurately sort of explain what's going on. But as always, if you did enjoy the video, hit that like button, let me know what you thought. If you did find it informative, then let me know about that. It's always great to know if it is kind of useful for you guys to have these sort of videos. I enjoy doing them. It allows me to talk a bit more about my kind of more academic side of my life with my engineering degree. But yeah, that's been the Sauber, the 2017 Challenger. I will join you next time for another Let's Talk for the next car. I can't actually remember which car it is on Tuesday. I just looked at my notes on my phone. It's the Renault car, so that should be a pretty exciting one, because obviously the Renault, remember, was essentially a 2015 Lotus last year, so it's going to be really exciting to see how much their car has changed for this year, finally, with a full development year from the actual Renault people, obviously, so that's going to be quite interesting, and also going to be interesting to see what livery they go for. But yeah, this has been the Sauber 2017 Challenger. Again, if you're new around here, then do subscribe for more F1 videos just like this and weekly Formula 1 content. But I've been Aarava, hope you enjoy the rest of the day, and I'll see you guys next time.